Good morning, friends. Brooke here from LegaSHE. It's Monday. It's gorgeous. Day is getting started. I got stuff to do. So I thought I would pop in and talk about a concept in commercial real estate which directly ties to 2024. I'm going to talk about that concept before I start the rest of my day because I'm actually really enjoying starting the day this way with you all. But before I talk about the concept of obsolescence, fun, before I get there, there's a button somewhere down there. If you want to join me, follow along, be one of the early folks to join me because this thing is catching on and gaining some steam. Click the button, click the button. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere over there. So it's a little subscribe button. I would be joyful. I'm already joyful, but I would be even more joyful if you would join me on this journey. So without further ado, we're going to talk today about obsolescence of properties, obsolescence of buildings. The term is big and it sounds a little scary, but it's not. There are three types of obsolescence that I'm just going to touch on briefly, and then I'm going to tie it together with 2024 and how lots of folks are a little edgy about commercial real estate. I'm going to try to make a little bit of sense of it for us using the lens of logic and rational analysis. I'm not going to use the lens of the world is doom and gloom and everything is on fire and falling apart. I'm going to use the lens of logic to talk about buildings. But before I do that, we're going to talk about obsolescence. So what is obsolescence? Obsolescence is something becoming obsolete. So in the context of a building, for whatever reason, and there are three types of obsolescence I will touch on, but for whatever reason, that building cannot be used any longer. That is obsolescence. So there are three types of obsolescence. The first one that most people think of is physical obsolescence. The second one that a lot of folks think of is economic obsolescence. And the last one, which is the one I really want to dig into with you all, is functional obsolescence. So without further ado, physical obsolescence. Someone let their building go to pot. Building is falling apart. That is physical obsolescence. Building's not maintained. Building has just literally fallen apart. So when you think of physical obsolescence, the physical structure can't really be used any longer because it hasn't been maintained appropriately. And you know my theme is simplify, so I'm simplifying it down to what you really need to think about when you think about this concept. Physical obsolescence, physically the building can no longer be used because somebody let it fall apart. Physical obsolescence. Your second concept is economic obsolescence. That is things outside of the control typically of the owner. So sewage plant moves in right next door. That's going to impact your property. A major highway is going to be built right in front of the property. That's going to economically impact your building. So you want to think about economic obsolescence as there is something that is happening outside and in the periphery of the property that is going to affect the economic viability of the property. So economic obsolescence is I'm getting hit in the wallet because something has happened near me or proximate to me. There could be other things like zoning changes, right? A zoning change is an economic, could cause economic obsolescence if the building that you have is not zoned for what the zoning will be, and therefore you know that that neighborhood is going to be changing over and your building's going to be impacted by that zoning change. So there's a lot of ways that economic obsolescence can occur, but I want you to think about that as the external as opposed to the physical obsolescence being the internal ownership allowed the building to fall apart. And then last but not least, functional obsolescence. And this, my friends, is the point that I want to tie to 2024 and to the major media outlet headlines, because I want to shed a little bit of light on why it doesn't pay to run around ever expecting doom and gloom, and why we need to be logical when we're thinking about commercial real estate. So, functional obsolescence, like physical and like economic, it is always there from the beginning of time. We no longer live, work, occupy caves or nomadic dwellings, for the most part, in the United States. I'm using the United States as an example. We wouldn't be conducting trade or business in a cave today. So caves for us are functionally obsolete in terms of what they at one time had been used for. So this is trends in buildings. This is trends in how we work and how we live. It's different from economic and different from physical in that, I want to use an example to explain this. Years ago, when offices were first created in the early 1900s, the original layouts of offices were quite like factories, factory floors, because everyone was very familiar at that point in time with factory layouts. So they got the bright idea, hey, if we organize a factory floor in this way with various stations and individuals being overseen by a foreman or somebody who's, overseeing the factory floor, well, that works there, so let's bring that into the office context. And so when you looked at floor plates and layouts of early offices, they often were set up like a factory floor with overseers. True story. So why do I bring that up as an example of functional obsolescence? Because a functional obsolescence is a product of the time in which you live. And when something's a product of a time in which you live, it is subject to constant change. It will always evolve. And so as you're designing and building buildings, sorry, I have an itch right here. Oh, it's a piece of hair. There we go. I'm good now. As you're designing and building buildings, there's often, when you think about, why did somebody in the 80s build their house like that? Or why did they, use that style of layout? There's an evolution of how we live, and as we evolve how we live and work and play and consume and trade, as we evolve those things, buildings can actually become functionally obsolete. They don't function for the way that we live now. And this is constant, right? What you liked 3 years ago in your home layout is going to be different from what you like today. Open floor plan or open plan office layouts. Do you remember when open plan office layouts were the rage? And so many properties were designed for open layout, and then after a few years of folks working that way, which was actually quite similar to the factory floor conversation I just had with you about offices being designed like factory floors, open layouts are kind of similar to that. See the wave and the change in the way that it kind of comes and goes and cycles. The way that we operate in one context may come back later. It may die off. It may resurface 100 years after the fact, right? So functional obsolescence of buildings is that they don't function the way that you now operate. And so most buildings, when that happens, there's two things that happen when you have functional obsolescence. You have curable or incurable functional obsolescence. Curable functional obsolescence means I can take this building and repurpose it into something else. I can cure the functional obsolescence. I had an office here, and now I have a layout, a floor plate, the sort of the way that the floor is laid out. I can figure out how to reconfigure it to make this a residential building. And there's incurable functional obsolescence. Incurable functional obsolescence is basically the building needs to be torn down. And we have examples of that throughout history of buildings that are incurably functionally obsolete. And there's typically an attempt to cure those buildings, but ultimately they have to be either cured or torn down because they're incurable in their functional obsolescence. What does this have to do with 2024 and all of the news headlines, Brooke? Well, if functional obsolescence is a constant, meaning as you're building and designing buildings, you have to consistently think about where the world may be going, then it should never be a shock to anyone writing an article about commercial real estate that it is possible that buildings have to be reimagined, because they've always been reimagined as trends and the way we live, work, play have changed. As trends have come up and the way we live, work, and play have happened. We're constantly evolving. Anyone who says, well, that can't be because it wasn't that way for the last 10 years, isn't recognizing that constant change is normal. Constant change to how we live, work, and play is normal. So I take with a grain of salt always as we witness folks get incredibly irrational over changes in the built environment. Using office as an example today. Offices are never going away. They're just not going away. But there's going to be a cure period, right, for those offices that are functionally not working the way that we need offices to work today. That's a norm. That needs to be normalized. That's not the end of the world. So as you look forward into 2024, 25, 26, and you see the headlines related to the world of commercial real estate is changing, it's shifting, I respond with, yeah, it is. There's opportunity in the change. There's opportunity wherever there is newness, wherever there is evolution. And as offices and homes and retail, as it evolves, she who understands and is willing to make a bet, she who understands that that is a constant, that change is constant, and she who is willing to make a bet on, I think it might go in that direction. You're the individual, you're the groups that are going to be making the built environment for 20 years from now, 25 years from now, 30 years from now. Because it always has been this way, and it always will be this way. The world will evolve. It is sometimes hard for us to see that because I'm making my summary now, we have a hard time imagining the future when we're looking backward. And all of us look at history and we look backward. We do it all day, every day, right? But it's very hard to imagine what the future could look like when we're looking that way, when we're looking in the rear view. I invite everyone, open your eyes, recognize that obsolescence, especially functional obsolescence, is a constant. Buildings are always evolving. And then look forward and say, so what does that mean? And how might I make a determination for myself of what spaces make sense for me when I'm looking at commercial real estate, either investment, lending, ownership. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day today.